Your voice is needed, and the story of your belonging is just beginning.
I'm Isabel Hart, 31 years old. Last week, at my father's 60th birthday dinner, my mother slapped me across the face in front of 69 guests. My sister clapped. My father leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said, "Serves you right." No one stood up for me, not one. But what they didn't know is that I had walked into that room carrying more than just the shame they tried to hand me. I carried the truth. A truth I've kept silent for years about the lies, the money, and what they've done behind closed doors using my name. If you've ever been humiliated by your own family in front of a crowd and made to feel like you were the problem all along, I want to know where you're watching from. Because I really do wonder how far this story will travel. I'm the eldest daughter, born into a mission no one ever asked if I wanted. Responsibility, expectations, the family model. In my house, being the firstborn was never a privilege, it was a silent sentence. Since the moment I could remember, I was taught to stack chairs after dinner, wash my own clothes, serve drinks to guests, and stay silent when being scolded. My mother never said, "Thank you," to me. She only said, "You're the older sister." Set an example. But what I never saw was anyone actually looking at me. Sophia was different. 2 years younger than me, fair-skinned, blonde-haired, with dimples. She was called our little angel since she was a toddler. Mom would stroke her hair and say, "You should be proud to have such a beautiful and talented sister." That sentence became the background music of my childhood, repeating again and again. And each time I heard it, it felt like a small, sharp slice across my heart. Sophia started piano at 6, ballet at 8, and Mom drove her to class every single day. And me? I walked to school alone since 6th grade, freezing in the winter, burning in the summer. But Mom never once asked, "Are you tired?" She only reminded me, "Don't let people think I didn't raise you properly." When I was in 10th grade, my school held a statewide speech contest. I spent months preparing, writing the script, recording myself, editing my own voice. The night before the competition, I asked Mom if she could buy me a nice outfit for the stage. She looked me up and down and said, "You act like you're going to win Miss America." In the end, I wore last year's old dress. That night, I won first place. When I came home and handed her the trophy, she glanced at it and said, "Why is Sophia late from class? Aren't you worried? And you're giving me this?" That was the moment I knew no matter what I achieved, I would always be standing in the shadow of my shining little sister. When Sophia applied to college, Mom hired private tutors and took her on campus tours across the state. When I applied, I wrote my own applications, applied for scholarships, and paid all the fees myself. The day I got accepted into an Ivy League school, I handed Mom the letter. She read it and nodded, expressionless. "All right, but don't neglect your sister." That sentence hit my heart like a nail driven straight through. No matter how far I made it, I would always be just the background for my sister's spotlight. Once, I was sick for an entire week, burning with fever, unable to eat or move. At the same time, Sophia had just won a gold medal in a dance competition. The whole family threw a small party to celebrate. Her friends gathered in the living room, and Mom cooked a feast. I lay in bed, hearing the laughter echo from downstairs, my mouth dry, my body aching. Mom only stopped by once, placing a fever pill on my nightstand before leaving. No words, no touch, nothing. I used to believe that if I just tried harder, studied better, behaved better, maybe I'd finally see pride in my mother's eyes. But the harder I tried, the more I realized one truth. In this family, love is not given equally. It's distributed based on usefulness and how much pride you bring to them. Family dinners for others, a place of warmth and reunion, were, to me, endless trials. I was always the default defendant. No evidence needed, no reason necessary. Just my presence alone was enough for the accusations to begin. Little by little, I learned to stay quiet. I learned to love myself through books, side jobs, and the quiet moments I stood in front of the mirror, reminding myself, I'm not invisible. But the pain, it never disappeared. It simply lay dormant, like ashes over a fire. Until someone came along and blew the dust away. One Christmas party, everyone gathered around the big dining table, lights sparkling, red wine glimmering in crystal glasses. Sophia held out her hand and flashed her new engagement ring, a diamond the size of a bean, glowing beneath the chandelier. Mom's eyes lit up. Then she turned to me and said, "See that? Now that's a daughter to be proud of, and you. How old are you now? Still no one to introduce?" I smiled, but not out of joy. It was the smile of someone who had grown used to being a background character in her own family. I took a sip of water, swallowing every word I wanted to say. I remember one autumn evening when the family gathered to celebrate Sophia's engagement. It was a small, cozy dinner. Yellow chrysanthemums in the center of the table, cinnamon-scented candles filling the room. I wore a beige linen dress I loved, simple but elegant. The moment I set my purse down, Mom glanced at me from head to toe and shook her head, muttering to no one in particular, "Looks like she just came from church. Why don't you wear something that actually makes you look like a woman?" The whole table laughed. Sophia covered her mouth and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Guess she still doesn't get what fashion means this year." I pressed my lips together, clenched my hands under the table. The spoon in my grip trembled, but I kept serving soup like nothing happened. One spoonful, then another. Each mocking comment pricked like a needle, not deep enough to bleed, but deep enough to bruise beneath the skin. Once, I called out Sophia for speaking disrespectfully to the housekeeper. The entire table turned to me like I had just insulted God. Mom's voice turned cold. "Don't teach your sister how to live when you can't even take care of yourself." I stood up to leave, but her hand pulled me back. "Walking out? That's easy. Clear the table first." I turned around, bent down, picked up each bowl and plate like an invisible person in the very house I lived in. There were dinners where Sophia talked about spa days, manicures, shopping in New York. I talked about the project I was developing. When Sophia spoke, Mom lit up. "Oh, really? Tell me more." But when I spoke, she gave a polite nod, then changed the subject to how the fish wasn't seasoned enough. I almost walked away so many times. I'd clutch my bag, feet already at the door, but I always turned back. Silently cleaned. Silently stood at the sink washing dishes, listening to their laughter echo from the living room. No one called me back, no one asked if I was okay. And so, the dinners continued, year after year, like slow-motion reels of a kind of emotional violence that no one ever names. But I remember everything. Every word. Every look. Every scar that left no mark. I'm not someone who cries easily. But every time I got home, took off my shoes, washed my face, I'd look in the mirror and ask myself, why do I keep coming back? Maybe I kept hoping, even if just faintly, that one day they would finally see that I, too, deserved to be heard, but they never listened. They only knew how to look. And what they saw was never the real me. Dad's 60th birthday was held at the grandest hotel in the city, crystal chandeliers shimmering above, snow-white tablecloths, gold-embossed menus, and a guest list full of high-profile names from the world of finance, law, and upper-tier relatives. Everyone arrived in polished attire and with a strange kind of anticipation, as if they hadn't just come to celebrate a birthday, but to marvel at the perfect family my parents had always been so proud to parade. Sophia arrived late, as usual, and entered like a movie star, tight red dress, soft curls, sparkling stiletto heels. In her hands was a black velvet box tied with a red ribbon. Inside, the key to a luxury car. The whole room gasped when she announced, "I got you the latest Range Rover, Dad, graphite gray, just the color you like." My father laughed, eyes gleaming like he'd just seen salvation in old age. My mother looked around the room, glowing with pride, her eyes silently declaring to the world, "See that? That's my daughter." I sat in the corner of the table, gripping my gift, a handcrafted wooden frame wrapped in canvas, holding a letter I'd handwritten over 3 nights. It held small memories. The time Dad drove me across the old bridge and told stories of his youth. The night the power went out and he sat in the living room playing the flute, the same melody I still hear in my dreams. I didn't have a luxury car, but I had memories and gratitude. When I stood up and walked toward my father to hand him the letter, the room paused for a beat. He took it, glanced at it, then set it down on the table without reading. My mother let out a soft laugh, sharp as a knife's edge. "Cheap, just like you." I said nothing, bowed slightly, about to return to my seat, bruised by her words, by the way my gift was brushed aside like scrap paper. But just as I turned around, I accidentally collided with a familiar figure approaching from behind Sophia. A glass clinked against my dress, and in a second, dark red liquid spilled down like blood spreading across white fabric. The room went still for a moment, then erupted in awkward gasps. A few guests covered their mouths, trying not to laugh. Someone even pulled out a phone to record. Sophia stepped back, looking down at the spreading stain, and smirked. "Still the frugal one, huh? I guess a thrift store dress can't even survive one glass of wine." Before I could react, my mother rushed over, heels clicking sharply across the marble floor. Not to check if I was okay. Not to ask Sophia what happened. But to grab my arm tightly and hiss through gritted teeth in front of everyone. "I told you, didn't I? It would have been better if you hadn't come. Every time you show up, something happens. Are you cursed or something, always bringing bad luck wherever you go?" I froze, standing still beneath the glimmering party lights, surrounded by dozens of eyes, some pitying, some gleeful. I felt something break inside me. But this time, it didn't fall back into my chest like before. This time, it rose, burning straight up into my throat. I raised my head, looked my mother straight in the eyes. My voice wasn't calm the way it used to be. It was the kind of stillness that only comes after too many years of being pushed down. "You think I'm a curse? A burden? Fine. Then, let me remind you, who's the one whose name is on the second house? Who signed the loan papers for Dad? Who was used as the clean name so you could dodge taxes? And who folded Sophia's wedding invitations until midnight while the whole family went to bed?" The air froze. "You call me bad luck. Did you ever ask how many times I've wanted to disappear for real? How many times I've thought maybe if I hadn't been born, this whole family would be happier?" My mother's eyes widened, her lips pressed tight, and then as if by instinct she raised her hand. Smack. The slap landed on my left cheek. It wasn't the force that hurt, it was the cold in her eyes that cut straight to my heart. Sophia clapped once, smirking. "Serves you right. Dad sat there with his arms folded, not even trying to hide the crooked smile. "Serves you right," he repeated as if everything that had just happened was some kind of evening entertainment. I stood still. I didn't cry, I didn't flinch, I said just one thing, quiet but clear. "Thank you, Mom, thank you everyone, for proving to the world that I was never imagining things." Then I walked out of that party. No one stopped me. No one called my name. But in my bag was a phone with the contact list already open. And that one tap that would change everything. I was the one whose name was on the deed to my parents' second house. They told me, "It's just an investment property, we just need you to hold it for paperwork reasons." I was 23 when I signed, still living on instant noodles in a rundown apartment in Brooklyn. Mom sent me just one cold email. "Sign it quickly and send it back. Don't ask questions." I signed. I said nothing. But from that day on, I started saving every piece of evidence. Every time they asked me to sign something for the family, I secretly recorded the conversation with my smartwatch. Every time Sophia bragged about a big win from an investment project, I took screenshots, tracked the transactions, traced the signature on the documents. Layer by layer, the mask began to peel off: tax evasion, asset fraud, falsified income reports, credit abuse. My family wasn't perfect. They were a manufactured corporation of deception. Camille once told me during a call, "You don't need power, you just need the truth, and to hold it until the right moment." I held it. For 5 years. I didn't lash out when they humiliated me in front of outsiders. I didn't run away when they blamed me for bringing shame to the family name. I simply watched. Documented. Every paper, every number, every voice. My father, the one who always smiled with dignified grace, had been using a business loan under my name to juggle his personal debts. One wrong number on a tax return. One forged character in a bank file. And I had them all saved in a secure hard drive, along with 2 backups, one with Camille, and one hidden in a private bank vault I opened in Vermont. My mother, the one who told me, "Don't be selfish, live for the family," had been using me as a human buffer, signing every risky document she was too scared to put her name on. Once, I pretended to spill coffee on a photocopy of a contract. She screamed, "Do you even know where the original is? Without your signature, we're all dead." That was the moment I realized I wasn't invisible. I was the foundation for the illusion they built. And Sophia. Sophia was the best performer of all. On social media, she was the image of success, startup founder, crypto investor, self-made millionaire. But most of her assets flowed through my accounts, from underground transfers to laundering money through fake NFTs, even hiring people to curate her image. I had it all, from transaction receipts to internal messages. They had no idea. The person they belittled the most was the one holding the hard drive that contained their entire truth. And that drive was ready to open. In the right hands, at the right time. And that moment was tonight. I walked out of the banquet hall beneath their sneering eyes. The whispers, the fake smiles, the looks of pity mixed with satisfaction pierced my back like arrows. But I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I knew I was no longer their victim. The night breeze brushed against my cheek, still burning from my mother's slap, but instead of pain, I felt clarity. As clear as the streetlights reflecting off the car window. As clear as the click of my heels on the marble floor. As clear as the intention I had nurtured in silence for the last 4 years. I unlocked my phone. One name was already starred in my contacts. Not a lawyer. Not a financial advisor. Just the one person I still trusted: Camille. Camille was my best friend from college, though no one in my family ever bothered to know what she actually did. They never cared. Every time I mentioned her, my mother would scoff. "Can't you hang out with someone with a proper career?" The irony. Camille was a federal investigator specializing in high-level money laundering and credit abuse. I hit call. One ring. Then a low, sharp voice answered, "I'm guessing you're ready." I smiled for the first time since I walked into that party. "Cam, let's begin. I'm sending the file now. Everything is organized by timeline, case code, evidence, addresses." I didn't miss a thing. Oh, the truth is, I had known everything. Every wire transfer under my name made without my consent. Every time Mom told me, "Just sign it quickly," I silently scanned the contract and stored it. Every time Sophia bragged about her rising real estate value while using my name to dodge taxes, I took notes. And every secret meeting between Dad and his bank contact, I recorded them remotely using a tiny device hidden inside my keychain. I didn't speak up. I didn't confront them. They thought I was stupid. That I was submissive. But in reality, I was the only one who had been listening to everything they tried to hide. Camille replied quickly. "Good. I'll need notarized verification. Do you have handwritten signatures?" "Everything's included. Even that recording from last year where my mom said, 'Just use her name, she won't know the difference.'" I heard a light sigh from the other end. "They still don't know you used to work as a legal assistant at the federal attorney's office, do they?" I chuckled. They never cared enough to notice what I did as long as I didn't disrupt their illusion of a perfect family. Camille paused, then spoke slowly, with certainty. "Then, it's time to flip the board." I nodded, as if she could see me through the phone. "Yeah, it's time." As I ended the call, the night sky seemed to still. Not a single star. But I didn't feel lost. I felt calm. As if the entire world was finally breathing in sync with me. No longer choking me, no longer dragging me under. I turned to look back at the building behind me, the party lights still pouring golden beams through the glass. Inside, my mother was smiling among wealthy guests. Sophia was being toasted and praised. And my father sat there, like a satisfied king on his throne. They had no idea. Their perfect world had already begun to crack. From that one phone call. From the very hands of the useless daughter everyone forgot. And this time, I wouldn't be coming back to clean up the mess. 3 days after my father's birthday party, a sleek black SUV belonging to the Federal Investigation Unit pulled up in front of the grand house they once proudly flaunted to the press. At exactly 6:45 a.m., just as my mother was finishing her morning pot of coffee, 2 agents in FBI jackets stepped out and knocked on the door. "I'm Agent Noland. We have a federal warrant to search this residence and seize all assets linked to transnational money laundering." My mother went pale. She barely managed. "There must be some mistake. It's probably Sophia." Before the female agent beside him opened a thick file. Inside, investment accounts registered under my name but accessed through Sophia's IP address, illegally transferred assets, and most damning of all, a voice recording from a smartwatch I was wearing the day my mother forced me to sign a fake contract. Sophia, meanwhile, was at a studio filming a promotional video about her self-made millionaire lifestyle when she was ordered to shut down all accounts and surrender her personal laptop, phone, and all cryptocurrency wallets. She tried to call our mother, but all communications had already been cut off. An hour later, my mother received an emergency federal court summons. She was charged with laundering digital currency through a shell network of dummy corporations, most of which were registered under my name. She sat silently in the back of the police vehicle, for the first time no longer the elegant hostess of weekend tea parties. As for my father, once the esteemed director of a major bank branch, he was now under investigation for a string of falsified loan documents. He had used my name as collateral for illegal loans, forged my signature, and funneled dirty money through layers of disguised accounts. When officers arrived at his former office, his colleagues didn't speak. They just watched. Not a look of surprise among them. Only the silence of people who had always known but never dared to say a word. The news spread like wildfire. The city's front page blared the headline, "Model family exposed in multi-million-dollar laundering and fraud scheme, eldest daughter linked to dozens of illegal assets." Sophia's social media accounts lost hundreds of thousands of followers overnight. Brands that once partnered with her erased every trace of her. On TikTok, expose clips labeled "Rich Kid Exposed" began flooding the feed. People dissected her old videos, her motivational quotes, her diamond ring flexes, then lined them up against the investigation reports. One evening talk show even aired a special feature titled, "A Family Collapses After a Slap." The host said, "An unbelievable story of downfall began with what seemed like a small act, a mother slapping her daughter in front of 69 people at a party. What they didn't know was that the girl held the key to the entire truth. That my mother's acquaintances started quietly unfriending her, blocking her number. Relatives who used to fawn over her now texted, 'Sorry, not a good time to talk.' The house that once symbolized pride was sealed off. Assets frozen, reputation demolished. And what no one could reclaim, the trust that shattered from the inside out. Every single one of them used to think I was weak, passive, the useless daughter no one cared about. But they forgot something. The quiet ones are the ones who watch the closest. And sometimes, silence stretched too long is just time spent waiting for the right moment. The moment their entire world fell apart because they slapped the wrong person. 1 week after everything exploded like a time-triggered detonation, Sophia came to see me. No cameras. No flawless makeup. No confident eyes that once convinced the world she was born to lead. Just a trembling girl at my door, eyes swollen red, heels worn down. I didn't greet her. I simply pushed the door open. Sophia stepped in like she had crossed into an unfamiliar world, one where the noise of the past had been peeled away from the skin. The apartment I rented sat tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, known by no one, untouched by any trace of my family. On the wooden table were 2 cups of tea already steeped, As if I knew she would come, and truth is, I always did. She sat down, hands shaking as she held the teacup, silent for a long time. Then she looked up, her voice rough and broken. I used to think you were just a shadow. Someone without a voice. Someone I didn't even have to look at to know you'd always be behind me. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe you're the reason this family didn't collapse a long time ago. I looked at her carefully, not to judge, not to reopen old wounds, but for the first time, to see her not as someone standing on a stage built by our mother. For the first time, she sat at the same level as me, a person, unguarded. I'm sorry, Sophia said, her voice cracking like shattered glass. I didn't know what I'd done until everything was taken away. I didn't offer forgiveness. Forgiveness was never what I sought, and I didn't need her to beg. I simply pushed the tea cakes toward her, poured more hot water, and let the silence speak for us both. A silence that wasn't bitter or cold but whole. Like a quiet declaration, I survived. And I no longer let the past define me. We sat like that. Neither of us said anything more. Maybe because there was no need. Maybe because, eventually, even the deepest wounds lose their urgency so long as they no longer bleed. That evening, after Sophia left, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Can you come back? Your father is sick. I don't know what to do. No apology. No admission of guilt. Just the same strategy she'd always used, invoking a reason to pull me back into the role I once knew too well. The role of the obedient daughter. But I wasn't there anymore. I stared at the message for a long time. No anger, no hurt, no expectation. Then I tapped delete. I stood up and drew the curtains. Outside, a light rain was falling. The drops tapped against the window pane like a heartbeat, slow, steady. I took a long breath, letting the cool air fill every corner of my lungs. I didn't respond. Not because I was weak, but because I no longer lived within their echo chamber. I didn't need to say anything. Because my silence was the period that ended everything. A year later, I live in Vermont. The house rests quietly among gentle hills, where morning mist clings to the base of the mountains and sunlight brushes lightly through the crimson maple leaves. It's the very same house my parents once told me to put under my name for investment convenience. Now, it's mine legally, permanently. No one can take it back, no more commands, no more. You're just holding it for us. Each morning, I wake up early. Not to clean up after anyone. Not to the sound of shouting from downstairs. But simply because I like watching the light stretch across the wooden window frame. I like the soft whistle of the kettle as I make coffee. I like the feeling of my fingers brushing against the new leaves in the little garden behind the house. I've planted chrysanthemums, mint, and a whole row of pale lavender. The kind of flower I used to think didn't suit me, just because my mother once said, "That flower's too delicate, just like you." I sit at my wooden desk and write the first lines of my book. Healing from a Toxic Family, a story from someone who no longer needs to be forgiven. Asterisk. I don't write to seek pity. I don't write to accuse. I write to remind myself that my silence that day wasn't surrender. It was the beginning. The beginning of a life without them, without dependence, without wounds that get to define me. There are pains that don't disappear. They don't dissolve like steam or get erased by time. But I've learned to live without letting them steer me. I've learned to breathe, to walk, to love myself, cracks and all. They're still out there somewhere. Maybe drowning in the consequences of their own choices. Maybe spinning stories, assigning blame, trying to scrub the truth clean. But I don't care anymore. I no longer live in their reach. I live here where birdsong replaces the sound of criticism. Where peace takes the place of verbal war. Where no one tells me what you should do to make mom happy, and instead, there's only me asking myself, what will I do today to feel at peace? And if you've ever been called useless, ever been humiliated in front of the whole family, ever been compared, ever had to swallow your tears at the dinner table, I want you to know, you're not alone. If you've ever been shamed by your own relatives in front of everyone, would you stay silent like I did, or what would you say? If you see yourself in this story, drop a 1-inch the comments below. You don't even have to say anything. I'll understand. Because sometimes, the ones who stayed silent are the strongest of all. Like, share and subscribe if you believe that silence can also be a way to reclaim justice. And if you're healing, I hope you know. You deserve a life that doesn't need